Tower Resources is the AIM-listed oil and gas company with a focus on Africa. It's recently raised £2.3 million, and the chief executive and chairman, Jeremy Asher, took part in the raise, and he is in alignment with shareholders. So, Jeremy, the raise, I'm assuming, is going towards the drilling of the Njom-3 well at the Tali project in Cameroon. And aside from financing and perhaps additional financing, I'm wondering what steps are left before you can spud that well.
The most important step is finalizing a rig contract, and we're working on that as almost as we speak. There's one rig that's available in the third quarter and potentially another one available in the fourth quarter. We're seeing what we can do about the third quarter rig. I think that the most important thing there is not just the timing, but frankly, we need to have the money in place. And of course, we need the license extension properly documented in order to start. So in many ways, it does still come down to the money as much as everything else. And I know that investors are as concerned as we are about how we finance this well. But from a technical point of view, it's the rig.
So I'm assuming, therefore, that once you have that rig, the money or the additional money that you need will come. So why is it taking so long to get a firm commitment about the rig? I mean, how long will that well require the rig for?
The well's a relatively short well. We think that we can get the well drilled, and including mobilization, demobilization, and a short test. We think that that should only take about 31 days. So it's not that the well is particularly lengthy, but that's almost more of a problem than it is a help, because it means that this is not a very big assignment from the point of view of the rig owner. And at a time when rig rates are very high and rig owners want long-term contracts and ideally 12-month contracts, they're not going to jeopardize a tender for a 12-month contract by taking on a 30-day commitment that could stop them getting that longer-term contract. So we've had to wait for rigs to become available. In fact, the rig that we're looking at is a rig that wasn't supposed to be available until the end of the year, but it now looks as if it will most likely become available at the beginning of July. Even that's not certain. That's why we're also looking at other rigs that potentially would be available in fourth quarter. And then if this rig isn't available in third quarter, it may also come available in fourth quarter or in first quarter next year. So that's why we have to remain a bit flexible ourselves, and why we can't be certain about the timing of anything, because we're always dependent on these third-party things. But I'm working as hard as I possibly can to try to get both the money and the rig sorted out by the end of third quarter.
So what we need to do is get the rig operators excited about this project, because, to be clear, it's not an exploration well, is it? The oil is there. You know the oil is there.
That's correct. Total drilled 2 discovery wells on the edge of the structure because they were actually looking for something else. So as a result, they drilled through 3 of the reservoirs that we're also targeting with this well. And we know they're there, and we know there's oil there. However, there's at least 2 more reservoirs, and possibly as many as 4, which appear on the seismic and seem to be present and quite thick towards the center of the structure, but which are not present at the edge of the structure where Total's wells were drilled. So there is a kind of exploration or appraisal upside in the well, but it's not an exploration well, at least not an exploration risk. It's an appraisal well, and we're designing it to be the first of 4 production wells, all to be drilled from the same location, but into different parts of the reservoir. And that will allow us on one platform to have wellheads for 4 wells and put them all into production simultaneously without the need for further subsurface investment. That's the longer term concept, but in the short term, it means this well is the gateway to what would then be a development, and the development would require further financing, but that hopefully can be done with trader production pre-financing or reserve-based lending in the usual way. It's this well that's the tricky one to finance because there's still an appraisal risk, a reservoir risk on this well.
So you've raised the £2.3 million. There's talk about a relationship with the BGFI bank and the fact that on record Tower Resources prefers perhaps the loan route or the debt route to dilution. And what about joint venture partnerships? That was you had discussions last year, but that didn't come to anything. So it sounds as though there's multiple routes to finance that you're exploring at the moment.
Well, first of all, the debt financing is obviously the best financing you can get. As I explained, the project is not really ready for conventional reserve-based lending or production pre-financing, and not until this well is drilled and flow rates are established for the reservoirs. Nevertheless, a few years ago, you could have put financing together on a debt basis. It'd just be mezzanine financing with equity type returns. That market's largely dried up. But what we're trying to do with BGFI is to get them to invest in us really on a corporate basis. I mean, the loans would have a corporate guarantee. And so it's not just project lending, it's also corporate balance sheet lending. And we're asking them to take a bit of a view on us. But that does mean that the capital requirements for this lending and the extent to which they can lay it off with other banks is different from what would be happening if they were just participating in a classic reserve-based lending loan. And that's one of the reasons why it affects their capital ratios and why it's something that needs the parent company's okay. You know, if we can get it to happen in time for the well, it'd be wonderful. If we can't, it's not wasted time, because sooner or later, even if we have asset-based lending for the development project, to have a local bank prepared to provide corporate level lending will be very useful for other things that the production pre-financing wouldn't naturally cover. So it's an important strategic discussion for us, which is going to, in my view, have benefit for us regardless. But we're trying not to count on it as a source of revenue for the well. And if it so happens that it does provide some of that money, that's all the better. One thing I've learned is that you often don't get a single silver bullet solution to all your needs, whether it's in finance or in anything else. So if this is a part of it, that's great. And otherwise, we're looking for the money from other sources. Now, on the farm out side, well, we've successfully farmed out a couple of times, but things have made it difficult to complete those transactions for different reasons. And frankly, the pandemic had a lot to do with it. But I think that it's still not easy to do these farm out transactions because each of them is a strategic deal for the partner involved. We're not talking to the majors. For the majors, this is too small. And anyway, they're net sellers of smaller assets. And the private equity type firms are too busy buying those assets that the majors are selling to look at this sort of thing. We're farming out really to people who are a bit bigger and have more money than ourselves, but are not that different from ourselves. But they also face cash constraints. They also have shareholders asking for dividends and so on, even if they have cash flow and production. And every deal like this is strategic for them, and the timing has to be right for them. Often they're selling something else in order to get the money to do this deal. And so therefore we have to make the timing work for them and us, and we have to be ready to work within the amounts of money they can afford as well as what we can afford. Now, that's why raising this money is important, because we have to keep the momentum going at the same time on the project. We also have to show potential partners that we're not simply lying there waiting for somebody to come and help us or bail us out, but we're moving forward and we're looking for them to come in alongside us rather than simply coming in and carrying us. And that's also important in terms of the message that we send to the government, who've been extraordinarily helpful and committed to us, but they deserve to see a similar level of commitment from us to moving the project forward. So that's the reason why I'm reasonably comfortable that we will get another farm out type transaction done, maybe not structured as a farm out this time because we are in a sufficient hurry that we don't want to go through another approval process, but an asset level equity financing, shall we say. I do believe we can do that, and we'd like to do that. But at the same time, you know, we have to be flexible about amounts, and we've got to be ready to put money in ourselves, which is what we're now doing.
So you mentioned the government there. I'm just wondering who has got the power within government, because in one of your recent RNSs that it says the Prime Minister had to give the Minister of Mines a bit of a nudge to accelerate the license extension process in response to Tower's request. Who has the power, and when did you make the request, and was it a straightforward request?
Well, the question of who has the power in government is sometimes an issue everywhere in the world. Apparently in the UK, the power is now held by the blob. But in Cameroon, the way things work is that the minister has the discretion over a lot of aspects of the production sharing contract that are set out in the production sharing contract. Any material variation to the production sharing contract is really something that requires the authority of the president or the office of the presidency. And that's the way it is in many countries, and Cameroon is one. So ultimately, the power lies with the office of the presidency. The Prime Minister speaks to the president, I gather, on a weekly basis, and is the main interface between the government and the president. So it's really the Prime Minister who needs to convey the wishes of the president to the minister. And the minister isn't going to do anything that affects the structure of the production sharing contract without the assent of the presidency. And ultimately, there needs to be usually a presidential decree for something like an extension. And then the minister provides a formal document called an arrêté in French. And that's the basis on which we move forward. Now, this sometimes appears within a few weeks, sometimes appears within a few months. It usually appears when it has to appear. Like many things in life, people don't do things if they're not immediately needed, and then they hurry up and get them done when they are. So I'm confident that it'll happen when it's needed. We actually discussed this with the Prime Minister and the Minister during my last visit to Cameroon at the end of March. We formally applied for the extension in the beginning of April. And so at this point, the process has been ongoing for a few weeks, and that's not unusual. With the rig contract still moving ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a little while longer to get it, but I'm confident that when we need it and when a rig contract is imminent, the extension will also be ready if it isn't ready already.
So what was the main reason for applying for the extension? Is it just a safety net? Are you just being cautious?
Well, no, the current initial exploration period expired on May 11th, so we need it extended. We've asked for a full year's extension, and I explained to the Minister and the Prime Minister when I was there the reasons, because although we see rig availability now, we're still not certain of the timing of the rig availability, so we need to allow plenty of time. And also, we also want to have time after the rig is, after the well is drilled, to evaluate the results and begin the planning of the next phase of work before we formally enter the first renewal period. But this is just the initial exploration period we're in. We have a first and a second renewal period available to us, each of which is for 2 years and may be extended at the discretion of the minister for a further third year. And we don't have any relinquishment requirements at the end of each period. So provided we get this well drilled, we still have a very long period available to us under the existing exploration phase of the license for further exploration of the other structures on the license and of the Njonji structure. The great thing about the Cameroon Petroleum Code is that even while we're doing that, we're able to apply for a temporary production authorization to get this Njonji structure online with the 4 wells we plan to drill, and to do that under a temporary production authorization while still doing the other exploration work.
So there's a lot of moving parts there, Jeremy. In an ideal world, you'll spud the well either Q3 or Q4, and you could have this production platform generating oil at the end of 2024 in an ideal world?
In an ideal world, yes. The 2 things that need to be done on the approval side are an environmental and social impact assessment for the production operation, and obtaining a temporary production authorization, which in turn requires approval of the equipment that we'd be using. Those 2 things can overlap a bit, but we know that environmental and social impact assessments take 6-7 months because we've already done 2 of them in Cameroon. And the temporary production authorization process could be another 6 months. We think that everything we need to do from a technical point of view can be fitted into that time frame. The long lead items for the additional drilling, the drilling itself for 3 more wells, be a couple of months, maybe maximum 3, and the construction and bringing the platform and production equipment can all be fitted into that schedule comfortably. Having said that, things often take longer. I don't think the authorization process itself needs to take longer, but we may find that it takes longer to specify equipment. We may have an unexpected lead time problem. So I can't swear to you that it'll only take us 12 months to get to production. But what I can say is it's those orders of magnitude, and that's why we're keen to get this well drilled as soon as we can, so that we get to production hopefully by the end of 2024 or not long after.
It's because many investors are impatient and many are jettisoning their stock. So I think that the transformational bit of news they're hoping for, I'm hoping for you, it comes in Q3 or Q4, Jeremy.
Well, I think that getting the well drilled will make a huge difference. Right now, I think AIM is not working particularly well in terms of supplying capital to small cap oil and gas companies. And I think it's a problem not just for us, but across the sector. And I think as a result, investors are looking at us right now and they're saying, well, are they going to get the well drilled? I don't think people are worried about what happens when the well's drilled or what happens after that. Once the well's drilled, they will worry about those things, but not now. I think right now they're saying, are they ever going to get that well drilled at all? And we're valued the way we are at the moment because people are worried that we're not going to be able to get the well drilled. But what we believe is that we definitely will get the well drilled. We've raised money at the asset level before, and we will do it again. And we have healthy discussions going on at the moment in that regard. We will get a rig, I do believe. And I think that although it's painful having to follow our money, and it's also painful having to let someone else follow your money for you, You know, there was an old saying, I think it was the first Lord Rothschild who said, the time to buy is when there's blood in the streets, even if it's your own. And you really do have to see both sides of the coin. This is a problem across the AIM sector, across small cap. And the reason why many of us are invested in the oil and gas sector on AIM is precisely because values are cheap, precisely because institutions are shunning the space at the moment. And that means that the prize is great. But unfortunately, it's not easy. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. And it does require a bit of patience. I'm really sorry about it. But the fact is that this is not a business where you can, like in the US, simply drill a shallow well and tie it into the pipeline that's just next door running across the property. It's not like that. And as a result, it's more difficult, but the rewards are much greater.
Jeremy Asher, Chief Executive and Chairman of Tower Resources, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.